Mosaka, 12 to 3 p.m.
It's 27 minutes to 1 o'clock. And yes, I'm still ecstatic, still jumping for joy that we now have 3D printers available in South Africa. But now we're moving on to a very important subject matter. I think last week we sort of touched on the importance of preparing and being thoroughly prepared for interviews and having the tools you need when you go into the job search. That's a very arduous process. I mean, it can take months upon months. And the normal practice is that many people will just scour the newspapers, look through sites to look for positions, and then submit their applications, make contact with the recruiters, submit their CVs, and just hope and pray for interviews or for that call, that ever important call. But now we've got Dr. Hilton Rudnick, who's the managing director at Omnicor. And Omnicor, what they do is actually they develop both personal they develop individuals as well as organizations, and they use science-based business solutions to help these individuals or organizations. But he's been working in this space for a very long time, which includes academia. He's lectured over the years, but now he's MD at Omnicor, and he has carried out, or he has run a whole ton of psychometric tests for the employed and unemployed over the years. And I think he's very well positioned to take us through the importance of psychometric tests and where exactly they come in. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Rudnick.
Thanks. It's Hilton Rudnick. You can just call me Hilton. That's fine.
Okay. And we're also joined by Deepa Dayal. She's a senior consultant at Omnicor. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, I mean, I remember having a psychometric test many years ago. Are they still quite common today?
So it's very common. A lot of organizations use psychometric testing as a way of screening people into the organization. Mm-hmm. And that's because it's really a good shortcut for getting to understand people well. We know that the most prolific way of getting people into organizations is through a job interview.
Yeah.
But a job interview is, most people are putting their best foot forward, as they do in assessments as well. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of distortion and noise, what we call noise, in a job interview, because it's very difficult to get to who the person really is and what they're capable of. So psychometric assessments are a really good way of looking at someone's abilities. We look at cognition is like a key thing. What is the person's complexity of thinking? What is their analytical abilities? Plus we do personality questionnaires, and depending on the role, you could also include things like basic skills, numeracy, literacy, as well as leadership. So Deepa is actually a psychometrist who works very closely with the administration of the tools and the interpretation of the profiles. And I would say that in any given month we probably do something like 300 to 400 different assessments.
So they vary. It's not one standard test.
That's exactly correct. You would basically choose what we call a battery of tests based on the specific competencies of the role.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to, if an organization wants to screen people through the assessment process, normally what they would do first is interview the person and see that they like them. They would then say, okay, so we want to assess this person.
Yeah.
And the first thing we would do is ask them to send us a job description. What are the competencies in the role that are required? Like, I imagine for a job like yours, one of the competencies would be verbal fluency, it would be good listening ability, it would be able to get on well with people, to understand people, and you've also got to really react fast and think on your feet based on the conversations that are happening. So those are some of the competencies that would probably be with a radio presenter, and those are some of the things that we would look for if we were doing an assessment on you. I mean anything you'd want to add on that, Deepa?
I think with psychometric assessments, they've evolved quite a lot based on past experiences, and a lot of assessments are well researched, and we use assessments based on very specific requirements, as Hilton had mentioned.
And how long have they been in operation for? How were they discovered that it's and designed?
So they've actually been around for hundreds of years. They were first used really in the military to determine where people are best equipped to be deployed. So who would be best equipped to be, for example, at the front line, who would be less prone to stress. So they have evolved. I mean, there is a very rich science around assessments. There are journals that are specifically devoted just to really the validity and reliability of assessments. So there's, a strong academic community that really supports it.
I think that's reassuring to know that they've been around that long. So what is it in the brain that is reacting and is responding rather while we are taking these tests?
Well, I mean, I think that's a good question. The tests are often a little bit edgy. They're a little bit provocative. So when people come for an assessment, for example, in an ability test, there would be something like analytical reasoning, would give you the things that you've probably seen before, like those shapes that get increasingly complicated. And you have to determine what is the sequence, what would be the next shape in the sequence, or what is the shape that is the odd one out. So they are stress tests because work environments are stressful. And you really want to see how people are going to cope in a stressful environment. And also, what is the breaking point? What is the point at which the person cannot answer the questions anymore? So those are the kind of things that would be there. But some questionnaires are a lot more benign. Like, for example, a personality questionnaire would ask you questions like, do you prefer to go to a party or do you prefer to stay at home and read a book? Now, what it's really asking underneath that is, are you an introvert or an extrovert? But it would have several questions in that kind of direction that would put together to get a sense of where on the introversion-extroversion scale you most likely to land.
And Deepa, there's no right or wrong answer, is there?
No, for psychometric assessments, as Hilton had mentioned, it's looking at one's preferences. So definitely there's no right or wrong, because we have all kinds of people in the work environment. With certain other types of assessments, like your cognition, where you have to look at those patterns and shapes, and other type of assessments that we call immersion exercises, where it's really competency based and we're testing, really on the job performance. I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong answer, but there's a certain level of competence that we're looking at for a particular role or level in an organization.
Okay, and it looks at someone's cognitive abilities.
Yes, absolutely.
It looks at a variation of abilities. So we're looking at cognition, and then with personality, for example, preferences, and with skills, certain behavioral competencies that are actually displayed in the work environment.
And at what process would this be necessary? At what part of the process? The steps that often are taken towards recruiting someone?
Yeah. Look, it's a little bit, I wouldn't say it's expensive. I think it's good value to do a psychometric assessment on people. Most companies wait until they've interviewed the person. So say there's 10 people who apply for the job. They interview those 10 people. They get it down to a short list of maybe 3 or 4. And then they would send those people to us to do the kind of final evaluation of those people. So that's generally the way it works. But there are some organizations who would send all the people to us first and then let us choose the shortlist, and then they would interview that shortlist. So it really does depend, but I think that the first way I explained it is probably the most common.
Yes, and how much weight does it carry with employers towards recruiting or selecting a candidate?
I think it depends on the company. We prefer it to be weighted as just one lens of looking at the person. So obviously what the person's whole job history and their performance and the reference checking that you would do about the person, plus the way that they do in the interview, are all really good ways of assessing if a person's a good fit with the job. So we would see our way as an important lens, but not the only lens. We would want organizations to check, and they inevitably do. I do feel sometimes organizations maybe place a little bit too much weight on the assessment, but you want to really get a full picture of the person by using all the methods that are available.
And is it considered or used at a certain tier or a certain level within an organization, that for I guess maybe the low levels of the hierarchy, if I can put it that way, in that organization, that is not considered?
Psychometric assessments are more commonly used at your higher management levels, but there are a wide array of assessments that can be used straight throughout the whole organization, and I think that's also becoming more common these days. So definitely it can be used throughout the organization, but more so your senior specialists moving up to top management.
It's true. There's more risk in an organization when you're employing a senior person. If you get that wrong, you may only know it probably in a few years' time if the person's made like strategic decisions that are inappropriate. But the fact is that we assess from blue collar workers, from security guards all the way to CEOs, and you know, I mean, I think the price is quite different in doing maybe a blue collar worker, but there's great value in screening the right people. Even if you employing a security guard, you would want to get the best, most intelligent security guard available rather than someone who's just a warm body.
Wow. Are there areas where you think it's critical, like maybe the police, for instance, the SAPS? Are there areas where you feel they need it most?
So look, you're talking to people in the assessment business, and we obviously believe in the work that we do. I mean, having said that, I think that often when I'm sitting in a room of people and we're pitching assessments, I'm the most skeptical person about them. I think assessments really have to be used in a very cautious way. There's a way of using the wrong assessments.
Yeah.
You could use overseas assessments that maybe don't apply here at all, or you could use assessments that are pitched at the wrong level. So, I mean, I think that absolutely areas like policing, like paramedics, like anything where lives are on the line, you want to get people who are best equipped to work in those kind of areas.
Yes.
But having said that, I would say that for any role, there's great value in doing psychometric assessments, because you can really get a lot of information about the person.
In your role.
Yeah, absolutely. That you wouldn't know from just an interview. Yeah.
And even there's even advice on how to prepare for one. Is there a way of somehow cheating the system, if I can put it that way, or even the preparation that is referred to? What sort of prep can people do, candidates do?
So we always say when preparing for an assessment, have a good nice rest. That's the first thing we say.
Yeah.
There are always widely available on the net sample questionnaires that one can go through, for example, on our website as well. There's a whole lot of sample tests that one can do. You know, at times, especially when it comes to things like personality assessments, people do want to portray themselves more favorably. So there's kind of a way of looking at, you know, what is this particular question looking for, and how can I answer it in a manner that will be more favorable.
Yeah.
But I think it's also, having said that, important to remember that there are built-in scales, because these tools are well researched, so there's always built-in scales to say, look, there's some indication of impression management that's come up.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's called faking good. It's also called social distortion. So if you have people who are trying to portray themselves in a way that they're not, there are items inside of the questionnaire that people won't know about them.
Yeah.
But if they answer too many of them in a certain way, you can tell if the person is
The
putting
real
on a
you
favorable
will
impression.
emerge.
Yes.
So I guess part of our advice is, besides have a good night's sleep, is also just go and be yourself. You know, I mean, if you want to be a good fit with the role, you want to be congruent with the competencies of the role, and as Deepa says, we can determine if people are doing impression management in the questionnaires. You know.
Well, my guest right now, Dr. Hilton Rudnick, he's the Managing Director at Omnicor, and we're also joined by Deepa Dayal, and she's a Senior Consultant when it comes to psychometric assessments within Omnicor. And this is really what we're looking at, the benefits of psychometric tests for both the employed and unemployed. We'll get into that after the break. But what has your experience been? You know, you sweat bullets. I think just the anticipation of what is often a 3-hour session, it's quite lengthy, and you know you have to put your best foot forward. But these questions are unusual. It's not the sort of experience or the sort of questions you encounter on a day-to-day basis. So it can really be a stressful situation. So how are practitioners using it, and how did you experience them if ever you had to take a psychometric test? Give us a call on 0861 987 000. I'm going to ask both of you to put your headphones on so that we will be able to hear questions from our callers. Good afternoon, Tulani. Tulani? We seem to be having a challenge hearing him. Hi, Tulani.
Hello?
There you are. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Hi. Okay, I've been saying this, an explanation of a certain psychometric question as if it's gospel. I just want to check out whether it's true. The question is, I've heard that there's a question in there, have you ever felt suicidal? Suppose it would be on the personality test. And if you answer it no, then the assessor knows that you are lying based on the fact that actually everybody, just by being alive, has at some stage thought of killing themselves.
Wow. Does this one exist, or are there other similar questions? Have you heard of this? What he's proposing?
I mean, I think what Tulani is saying is what we referred to earlier, which is that there are questions inside questionnaires that if most people would answer them in a certain way. So, a question could be like, "I have never told a lie," and if people think that they're doing impression management, say, yes, I've never told a lie. And we would know that that is not humanly possible, and we would know that there's a level of distortion. So I don't know the particular question that he's talking about, but it makes sense to me as one of the questions that could be used in a social distortion scale. I mean, having said that, we never really get into when we're looking at the results of someone from a personality questionnaire, we're looking at the construct, at the overall dimension measured, and not at the individual items. So that item on its own would not tell you anything. That item mixed up with several other ones where the person has distorted tells you more of a story.
Tulani, where did you come across it?
Just along the way. I mean, I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm a counseling psychologist.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, I guess it's all right to say you felt suicidal on a questionnaire.
Yes, I mean, I think it would be okay. I mean, and the reality is that no. We wouldn't know that you said it about that individual item. We're not really interested in that level of detail. We're interested in the pattern of scoring that has been applied in the questionnaire.
Okay. Thank you for that question.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Sure.
That was Tulani calling us from Linksfield, and you can also give us a call on 0861-987-000, your experience with psychometric tests. Now, so it discerns, or it looks at, I've also heard this, that it's not necessarily an IQ test. Doesn't test your intelligence. Hilton, is that inaccurate?
No, I mean, I think it's not inaccurate. It's true that it's not specifically called an IQ test. An IQ test is a specific type of test that itself has like 10 to 12 different scales in it. There are various different types. I mean, cognition is measuring problem solving and analytical ability, which would have a very high correlation with IQ testing. And the reason you do that is because intelligence is one of the best predictors of job performance overall. So if you could only do one test, you would choose a cognitive test, because that is going to give you, it's going to account for the most possibility that this person is going to work out well in the job. So cognitive tests, and there's many different types on the South African market, and there's different ranges of tests. Some of them look at your complexity of thinking, some of them look at your kind of depth of just power processing. They're really important tests in making selection decisions.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying, but what happens with discerning and seeing and identifying someone's strengths and weaknesses? Are you able to distinguish those?
Those are usually determined by, as Hilton mentioned in the initial stages of our discussion, looking at a fit for a specific role. So usually the process of choosing an assessment battery to actually providing feedback to both a candidate who's done the assessment as well as a client organization, we customize the competencies required for the particular role, and we look at then a specific benchmark that's required. So I think in terms of also looking at right or wrong, there's no specifics, but we can pick up development areas in relation to that particular role and what is required, and even strengths, I
mean, here's an example of that. Say you're looking to fulfill the role of a financial analyst in an organization. So we know that one of the competencies required over there would, say, for example, be numerical processing or a commercial orientation. So there are tests that measure those things, and we would set the range that the person is required to meet the benchmark. If the person falls out of that range, it would come up as this is a development area for that particular person. It may work on a personality side as well. If you're looking for maybe a person going into a position where they have to be a very assertive leader, and on the personality a questionnaire comes out that they're very accommodating, that they're very high empathy, and that they would struggle to be assertive, that would be something that we would flag and saying that this is not quite a fit with the role. And some things are easier to fix than others. You can learn the behaviors that go with assertiveness, but it's much more difficult to, for example, change introversion to extroversion. It's difficult, for example, to change someone who is non-analytical to be highly analytical. So in most of the competencies, there's some wiggle room, but there's not you can't reinvent the person to be something that they're not.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Well, we'll talk about the importance, particularly for young people, and in helping people identify what it is they're best suited for. It's 7 minutes to 1 o'clock. My guest right now, Dr. Hilton Rudnick, and he is the Managing Director at Omnicor, and he's also joined by Deepa Dayal, a Senior Consultant.
Switch to Vodacom, keep your number, and enjoy the fastest and widest network in South Africa. Vodacom, power to you. We all love spending time online, from eyeing the latest sports car to attending a concert in New York from the comfort of your couch. Now you can enjoy even more worry-free moments online with Vodacom. Switch to Red and get double your data for the first 2 months. That's twice the browsing, twice the connections, and twice as many ways to stay in touch. Now that's what limitless feels like. Only with Vodacom. Power to you. T's and C's apply.
The latest news.
Rescue teams have stopped searching for people at the Tongaat Mall after concrete slab collapsed yesterday. The eThekwini municipality challenged the Rectangle Property Investments, saying it failed to follow proper procedure. So far, 2 people have been confirmed dead after concrete slab collapsed.
Affecting your world.
We could actually take serious action. We may have to go back to court that now that this company, violated the court order. I don't know why the company decided to violate the court order, and this accident could have been avoided.
On Power 98.7, if you see a breaking news story, capture the moment and call the Power News line on 011 014 9098 or tweet us at Power 987 News. Now, we're talking Soweto. This is Power 98.7 on 103.6 FM. Now, we're talking Power Lunch, 12 to 3 p.m.
We're talking about psychometric tests, and joining me in studio is the MD of Omnicor, Dr. Hilton Rudnick, as well as Deepa Dayal. So if you have any questions, and I also want to hear about your experiences, if ever you've taken a psychometric test, it's not an easy process to go through. I think, yes, my guests might have said, relax, get enough sleep, be yourself, but anyone who has taken one knows that it's not an easy process. It's not without stress. It can often be very stressful, but it's an important exercise. But let's talk about for the employed and unemployed, and in determining and helping people understand what it is that they're good at.
Okay. So, I mean, if I was an employer who was looking for people to come on board, there's a few things that I would look at more specifically, and that I would weight more heavily than other things. So I spoke about cognition, which I think is very important, but there's 2 other constructs that are very important. The one is conscientiousness. So having hard-working people who are really going to go the extra mile, maybe work late if they have to, that would be another very important thing. So in addition to cognition, conscientiousness is very, very important. And the other thing that is also a very, very good predictor of job performance.
Sorry, Hilton, does that speak more to the attitude and just their work ethic?
Absolutely. It's that kind of thing. It's the work ethic. It's the attitude towards coming to work. It's coming to work because I'm motivated and I want to give my best and I set out high standards for myself. Those things are very, very important. The other thing that really counts is something called emotional stability. Now, emotional stability is, am I easy to get on with? Am I someone who under stress falls apart, that I'm difficult to get on with, I'm more neurotic, that I vent, my emotions are very close to the surface? Or am I someone who's much more even-tempered, who during a crisis will stay composed? Those 3 things, cognition, conscientiousness, and emotional stability, if you are looking for people to work, and our instruments can detect those things, those are really good things and are very good predictors of job performance overall.
Yeah, I think and
it makes sense to you.
Of course. And the last one that you mentioned, who wants a colleague who's just full of drama? It destabilizes the office. So I'm glad you can test for that. And for employers who've had a terrible experience with employees who are that way, who are emotionally unstable, will probably realize that this is an important exercise. Dumi on Twitter wants to know who is best suited to share an assessment report. and it says 360, etc., with a coaching client, coach or manager. So who's best suited?
In terms of an assessment report where psychometric assessments were done, specific tools were used in order to test behaviors like emotional stability.
Yeah.
Feedback is best given by a registered psychologist or psychometrist who's also trained in that specific tool. So apart from having a registration, we also undergo quite rigorous training and accreditation for different tools. So I think in terms of giving a feedback, those are the type of individuals who should be providing you with feedback.
I think that's absolutely right. There's a lot of nuance inside of a profile that comes out for persons. First of all, you're looking at the complexity of several tests joined together, and you have to integrate that information. And then the way that each dimension is tested on in each instrument is different. So as Deepa said, you really have to be qualified and accredited.
Yeah.
And South Africa is one of the countries in the world that has probably the most rigorous regulatory system around psychometrics in the world. Only certain people can apply them. You can't, for example, make up a test on a Sunday afternoon and give it to someone on a Monday. There's a real rigorous process for giving evidence of the validity of the assessment tool. Did you want to say something else there?
No, that's correct.
All right. Well, Hilton, you guys are giving away 3 psychometric tests. So our listeners can just, for whether or not they're thinking of a change in careers altogether, or whether they're trying to determine what it is that they're good at, can take a test, and you'll be able to give them the results.
That's absolutely right. We're thrilled to offer this to your listeners, and what I suggest that they do is contact us, and we'll look at what is the right set of tools to give to the people who may contact us, or the first 3 callers, whoever you're going to give it to.
Yeah.
Because, it may be different for each person. So we will certainly help them in select the right battery, and we'll be thrilled to share that information with them.
So if you want to take a psychometric test, just email us, powerlunch@powerfm.co.za, and we will then pass on your details to Omnicor, and you can go about taking your psychometric test. Get a good night's rest, of course. And the first 3 people will be free. It will be courtesy of Omnicor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
That was really fascinating. I hope to never ever do it again. That's all I can say, because it is quite a grueling process, because you're always second guessing yourself, and you're always trying to put your best foot forward or present the best you, but never knowing if you are right or wrong, or if indeed it will enhance or improve your score. So thank you very much. That was Dr. Hilton Rudnick, the Managing Director at Omnicor, and we're also joined by Deepa Dayal, a Senior Consultant with doing assessments at Omnicor. So if you do want to go for one, email powerlunch@powerfm.co.za, and the first 3 people will get to take a free psychometric test with Omnicor.
We all love being treated like VIPs. From red carpet hobnobbing to backstage access to shooting the breeze with the who's who on an 80-foot yacht. Now you can enjoy even more of the VIP life with Vodacom. Switch to Red and get exclusive access to